How is property divided in an Oklahoma divorce? I'm Tulsa attorney James Wirth, and I'm answering frequently asked questions about family law matters. And that's the question is, how do we divide assets? Well, I can tell you it's a multi-step process. So first off, before it even gets before a judge, both parties are going to want to make sure they have a complete understanding of what all the assets and the debts are. They want to have documentation of those things so they can be presented. Most cases get resolved before going to a final trial and giving it up to the judge. Because once we know what everything is, most of the time we have a pretty good idea what a judge may order, and then we can save ourselves the time and the money of actually putting on a trial. But regardless, first steps, you got to make sure that you know what all the assets are, what their values are. If we've got real estate, then you may want an appraiser. You may get an appraisal, and the other party may get an appraisal, and then they can present each one to the judge. The judge can make a determination what the value of the house is or the other properties based on that. But long story short on that, everybody needs to know what assets are involved and what they're valued at. So the second step is we have to determine what is separate property and what is marital property. So separate property is going to be the property that's awarded to that person that owns it separate from the marriage. And then marital property has to be divided by the court. So what is separate property? Generally speaking, it's anything that the party owned prior to the marriage, anything that was gifted to the party individually, and anything that was inherited by that party. So that's what you start off with. On the date that you get married, you've got all these separate assets. If you have an inheritance during the marriage, that is separate property. If somebody gives you something, including your spouse, such as a wedding ring, that is considered a gift and it's separate property. But just because it starts off as separate property doesn't mean that it finishes as separate property. So if you get an inheritance during the marriage and you keep it in a separate account by itself in solely your name, that's going to continue to be separate property. But if you put it in an account that has your spouse's name on it, that's going to be presumed to be an interspousal gift. So that separate property is now suddenly marital property. Also, same thing with the house. If you have a house that you own prior to the marriage, but you're continuing to pay on the note during the marriage, well, anything you earn during the marriage is going to be marital funds. And if you're using marital funds to pay on the mortgage or the note, then a portion of that is going to principal, and now you have commingled marital funds with separate funds. So that could transmutate that real property, your house, from being separate property to marital property. Or if you can convince the court that you can adequately trace the portion of it that's marital from the portion that's separate, then maybe you can get the court to divide it that way. So first step, determine all the assets. Second step, determine what is separate property. Third step, determine what is marital property. And then the marital property has to be divided equitably, which just means fairly. So most of the time that's 50-50, and that can be done by offsetting assets. I'll take this asset, you take that asset. Or I'll take this asset and I'll take that debt, and they offset each other. Or it could be done by dividing it. I'll take 50% of that, you'll get 50% of that, so on and so forth. The parties can either reach an agreement or it goes to a trial before the judge, and the judge makes those determinations. But either way, the standard for separating marital property is what is equitable, what is fair. So any questions about property divisions in your specific circumstances, you're going to want to talk to an attorney about that. Talk to somebody at my office by going to makelaweasy.com.